Welcome to the Extra Time Podcast, where you'll hear sports stories you might not have heard about from people you might not have heard of. Let's get into this week's show.
Welcome in once again to the Extra Time Podcast. It's an early Movember welcome, and you'll notice again that there's a bit more hair on my top lip this week. I'm growing that mo as quick as I can. Unfortunately, the beard grows faster than the mo because I don't shave the mo often. I like to wear it all year round, but Movember is a worthy cause, and I've been on the jog as well. Woodsy, I'm a quarter of the way through to my 60Ks, so make sure, and I'm not going to force anyone to do it, but it is such an amazing cause, and there's so many people in everybody's lives that we've got to keep around, and this is exactly where that money goes, to keeping your mates around. So make sure you follow the link and hit up my Mo Space, or anyone's who you see doing it as well, or create your own Mo Space. Get out there and get around it, because I know your mates will do that for you. But today, one of my mates isn't here. He's a bit under the weather, the fish, so all the best to him. But Woodsy, as always, is beside me. How you going, Mark?
Oh, I'm good. It's been an electric week of sport, and I think it's an electric week to come.
It sure has, and I think right off the top, it's something really exciting. We didn't discuss it last week, but we're discussing it now. It's AFLW Finals Week 1 this weekend. Last weekend was Week 10 of Season 8, and it's probably the best season yet, because going to the round, much like the AFL men's season this year, so many different possibilities for teams to make it or not make it. And in the end, it was all on percentage for those last few spots in the top 8.
Yeah, well, I think I'd much rather have spoken about it last week than this week because of those possibilities. And my Saints were still in it, and we only just missed out by percentage. But you look back at the year, and there were a few games we could have won. I mean, we lost the first 3, I think it was, and then lost one down the line. But had we won one of those early ones, we would have been in. Unfortunate, there was a bit of a contentious goal decision in the Sydney Fremantle game, but Sydney went on to win that by more than a goal, so it kind of counteracts that argument. I know there's a lot of discussion around the Saints supporters on another goal review has cost us. I'm not going to go into the previous ones, but no, it was a cracking season, and it looks set to be a great final series.
Yeah, and it's so good to see all 18 teams in, like we saw again this season. And like I mentioned, there was teams from 5th to about 13th that could have any of those spots going into the round. And so many teams relying on other results, which isn't what you want to see as a supporter of any of those teams. But as someone who was effectively a neutral with my Hawks, sitting down in 14th, with just the 3 wins this year, bit of an improvement there. But I really enjoyed it, and you saw so much movement going into the round. You had Essendon in 5th, they finished in 7th, and Gold Coast climbed up with their win against them. So they stole that spot against them on the Friday night. That was awesome. Huge from the Gold Coast Suns to win that as well, without superstar Charlie Rowbottom as well. And the Cats, they claimed that 6th position. That was the Suns. So they moved up. They've made the finals, and you mentioned Sydney jumping in for St Kilda, unfortunately, who couldn't get it done. They could get it done. They took care of their business against the Blues, but not by enough of a margin, and they missed out on the finals by just 4.6%, which is not much, really, in the big scheme of things, but that's just how it pans out. And we saw Collingwood, who needed to beat Richmond by a fair margin, which...
And it went the other way round, didn't it?
Yeah. Working on the women's footy show yesterday, Geordie Allen, one of the Pies stars, was saying that they haven't really won by 4 or 5 goals all year, so they weren't really going to pull it out in the last game. But at the same time, the opposite happened. And in that last quarter, the Tigers absolutely poured it on. So the Pies ended up going from inside the 8 to finishing 11th, and have now departed ways with their coach. So that didn't take them long, but it's the first time they haven't made finals under his tenure. So that's just the business of footy. It was good to see the Bulldogs get that one win a couple of weeks ago against West Coast.
Especially with Nathan Burke as their coach, and being a former St Kilda player, St Kilda legend, is one of those where I actually wish the Doggies luck in that regard. But it's talking about coaches though. Your mobs, Beck Goddard. I just got to say, absolute love the way that Beck goes about it, and always putting on something special each week for the players. I know a few weeks ago she wore a skirt to the game, and it's the first time she said she'd worn a skirt for years.
That's what it's all about as well.
I think her quote was, I think I haven't worn a skirt before. Last time I wore a skirt was when I was straight, is what she said. I found that hilarious.
And that's what it's all about, like that personality when, I guess, you're such a new team, you know you're probably not going to go and contend. You need something to keep you wanting to be engaged, and I don't think many people do that better than Beck Goddard, who's just so good for the footy club, but someone else who's been good for not just the Port Adelaide Footy Club, the Adelaide Crows Footy Club, women's football in general. They've already said she's going to present the medal. I think the league medal will be named after her one day. Erin Phillips has called time on her career, which you can't really put into words. There's accolades enough to, speak about for an hour in depth.
Oh, definitely.
Multiple Australians league medals, premierships, best on ground in premierships.
I'm pretty sure two.
Goal of the year, if you don't mind. Club captain.
The question though is, do you name the best and fairest, or do you name the grand final best on ground after her? I think that's the discussion we've got to have. I think there was a bit of discussion about Daisy Pearce a couple of years ago, but it's going to happen on a few of these. I think Erin Phillips is a worthy one, whatever medal gets named after her, and I think there will be one. It's only a matter of time now, but I think it's not a... And I think a question of not if, but which one.
Yeah, and when, if anyone's wondering her impact on AFLW and women's football, not just for obviously the two teams in South Australia, but the whole league, you can ask pretty much any player in the AFLW right now, and you just mention her name, and they can speak about her for, at least 10 minutes on how she inspired them to play the game. So it just goes without saying that's all you need to really know, and that speaks wonders to Erin. And they won by 58 points at home in her farewell against the Giants, which is about as good as she can go out. She kicked 1 goal too. She had about 16 disposals and 8 score involvements. So went out probably as best she could. Unfortunately, the Power finished in 15th. They'll be out of the race for the Cup, but at the end of the day, that's just, second. She's won her premierships. I'm sure she's really happy, and she doesn't mind that at all. And something that was new this year was the Combined Cup with men's and women's footy, and that was
the McClellan Trophy, which is a former trophy awarded to AFL teams. And I've actually walked by it a couple of times now. I had to actually have a look. So it was back in the day when the AFL had an under-19 system, a Resi's system, and the seniors, combined points of them would win it.
It's a great idea, and a bit of money goes in as well. I'm pretty sure Melbourne won that one, but it was interesting because they locked it in before last round when they were on top of the AFLW table, and then they went out and they actually got beaten by Brisbane in a Saturday night. I'm pretty sure it was Saturday night, the blockbuster there. So that was up in Brisbane as well. So that was massive for the Lions, who I don't really trust. They've been quite untrustworthy this season. They've won some pretty crucial games, but then they've lost some games they really shouldn't have lost. The one that comes to mind for me is the Collingwood game at home, where they kicked something like 4 goals 13, something ridiculous like that. But that win on the weekend locked in their top 4 spot, which will be absolutely vital for them, because if they were to drop out of that top 4, it would have been not curtains, but it would have been very, very hard for a team that is all about belief and finding, I guess, that positivity to win games. But that win also infected Melbourne, who went from the top spot and gave that up to the Adelaide Crows, who finished on top in front of Melbourne in second, and the Kangaroos, who have just been consistent all year but unproven against top 4 sides, in third. And then I mentioned the bottom half of the 8 before. So we'll go over to the finals, which will be on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. Some massive ones. So the first one is the qualifier. Adelaide take on Brisbane. So first versus fourth. And I mentioned Brisbane will be happy they got that 4th spot, but probably a little bit unhappy that they have to play possibly who I think is the best team in the competition. Like I said, I know that Melbourne looked so dominant throughout the year. They did get over Adelaide. They were on top for a lot of it. But I just think the Crows all round, defence to forward, midfield is almost second to none. I think Emily Marinoff is absolutely going to tear apart this final series. They've got the firepower up forward as well. And I just think they're menacing to a point where you play them and you have to play every single minute of the game. It's like Collingwood in the men's game. I think they're just so dangerous around the ground that you have to be on for the whole game to beat them. And we haven't seen that from Brisbane too often throughout the year. And the main thing I think in that one is I don't trust Brisbane solely for the fact that their goal kicking accuracy, much like their men's team, it's just put them out of games throughout the year, so much of the year. And in the finals, that's exactly that little thing that can lose you a game. And I mentioned coming up against Ebony Marinoff, who I think is, quite close to the best player, if not the best player in the competition. She has a remarkable year. She just racks up the disposals and she's leading the lead in tackles as well. And then she goes and hits the scoreboard. Some of her best games this year, she's kicked the 2 goals, 3 goals. So very dangerous player. And then they've got Caitlin Gould as well, who's finished third in the goal kicking for the year. So very hard team to beat. I think Brisbane can do it. They've got some superstars themselves. And they've been in and around before, but I think the Crows are just so proven that it's going to take big games for Brisbane out of the likes of Ellie Anderson in the middle of the ground to really lift them, and they have to be on their best in front of goal. So that's the first qualifier. That one will be over in Adelaide on the Saturday, and then we've got the first of the elimination finals with the Gold Coast Suns taking on Sydney, who've just snuck in. And I don't know about you, Woodsy, but I think when a team just sneaks into the 8 like this, and they've done it going away over to Fremantle, and they've got so much confidence, and they've got players like Chloe Malloy, who's come in and led the club in her first year there and done it beautifully, a couple of goals on the weekend. It's that sort of momentum that would be so dangerous for a team that's at home, favourite, coming off a win. I don't really know how to pick this one, but it's going to be really dangerous. And I wish Fish was here because he'd be pretty bullish on them, I'm sure. The Swans with momentum.
Oh, it's tough to see it's tough to pick which team. Gold Coast are definitely in form. Sydney, a couple of weeks ago, you wouldn't have picked it. I'm just trying to see how many wins in a row they've actually had. So they've had 3 wins in a row. Their last loss was actually against Hawthorn. I know you'll be a bit chuffed about that.
That was the Hawks' first win interstate. That was really cool, and that's something that I think we should really have to take into account here is the ability of teams to win on the road. And that's, I guess, if we have to be critical of teams, like it's something like the Saints struggle with a little bit. Like they won those 4 in a row at home and they were looking amazing, but then they lost that one in Fremantle where they got convincingly outplayed.
Yeah.
But then they came back home the next week. They beat Brisbane at home. And I'm sure it happened. It happened in the AFL when you've got young teams in the men's league. It takes a while to be able to get you so used to it and so confident to go interstate and win. It takes a while to do that. So that's where the best teams in the league, the more senior teams with more experience, that doesn't really bother them too much. But I think in the finals, it's going to be quite hard to tip against a team that has to go and travel. And I think that's the only thing that's worrying me about Sydney because, yes, they've got the momentum, but they had to go to Fremantle last week, which is one side of the country to the other, and then they've got to fly home and then fly up to the Gold Coast, and that's a lot of travel in about a week and a half. So
interesting. You
whereas
say that.
the Suns played at home last week, hosted Essendon, and now they get another home game here. So
No, interesting you say that. And I was watching the game intently, being a Saints supporter, hoping Fremantle would win. However, I did listen to Chloe Malloy after the game saying how they were on Sydney time. So yes, they've travelled, but they didn't actually go over to Perth and then adapt their timeline, go to sleep at a different time. They went, no, we're sticking to our Sydney timeline to effectively utilise our preparation.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, and I guess that's one way teams are trying to deal with it. And I really love hearing about that sort of stuff. You hear about it in all sport because all sport you have to travel at some point. And it's really always interesting to me to hear about how teams go about it. Over in the NBA, you hear teams go, we'll play the game at night, and then we get on the red eye straight to the airport. Some teams don't. Depends when you have your next game. So That's really good. And for Malloy to come out and say how confident they are in that, then that's probably going to be a close one. And I really don't know how to pick that one. I think Gold Coast at home might be tough, but the form of Malloy, Laura Gardner as well, who's just been outstanding all year, really been a standout. Averaged 29 disposals this season, absolute star in the midfield there. And I know they're just numbers, but the ability of Malloy, who's I think just really going to relish this finals opportunity, and I think she'll find a lot of the football and find herself in front of goals as well. But the Suns have been proven. They've been in the 8 throughout the year, and they are at home. So I'm not sure if they're going to have Charlie Rowbottom, whether she'll be back or not, which is really crucial for them. But I reckon it'll be an absolute ripper, that one, on Saturday night at 7:15. That one will be on the Gold Coast at the home of the Suns. So I don't really know who I can pick there, but whoever wins that one will also be a chance, I reckon, the next week to provide another upset. And then we come on to the Sunday, and the first one will be at the Cattery at GMHBA when the Cats take on the Bombers, which I think both of these elimination finals are actually going to be closer than the qualifiers, even though the teams are sort of been in and out of the 8 throughout the year, because I don't really know how you can pick them.
I think it's definitely one of those things. I actually agree with you, where you've got Adelaide and Brisbane. I think Adelaide's only way that they're going to lose this campaign is if they lose this week, and I can't see that happening, because they win this week, they get a home prelim, they win that. I'm pretty sure they get the home grand final, which is a massive advantage.
Because they finished on top.
Yeah, which is a massive advantage when you compare it to the AFL system, where it's you finish on top, you still have to play the G. Like, they might be playing, I don't know if Adelaide Oval is available, but they get to play in front of their fans.
Going over and playing a grand final in Adelaide against Adelaide's probably, in this competition, definitely, but like you mentioned, the AFL as well, if it ever happened, but one of the toughest things you could possibly do, because South Australian fans are so passionate, and the Crows have done it before. So it's a very scary proposition.
They're the only multi-time winner, aren't they?
Pretty sure, yeah. So
you can go back, see how many times they've actually won it. They're the only team to hold the trophy multiple times. So
it'd be cool to see a team outside that big four, that top four, take it home. But like you said, if the Crows get it done at Norwood Oval this week, it's going to be very hard for that to happen. But back onto this game between the Cats and the Bombers. I think the two standouts this season, 20-year-old Georgie Prespakis for the Cats, who's just finding footy everywhere around the ground, doing damage at all spots of the football field. And then Maddie Prespakis for the Bombers, which is going to be a really cool matchup this week. The Bombers in, second season, quite remarkable what they've done. They've been a very successful VFLW team, but now in the AFLW, they missed out on that spot, finishing 5th, but it sort of isn't too bad now, because they don't get to host that final, but they only have to go up the highway an hour to Geelong to play in. It's going to be an absolute belter. I think the Cats are in really good form. They absolutely tore apart my Hawks on the weekend at this same ground. So it's going to be a tough one for the Bombers, but if a team, I just think about it like, if a team has come so far so quickly, they're obviously doing something right, and they've obviously got enough belief where they wouldn't be scared of anything.
It also goes to show the AFLW system, it's still in its infancy, 8 seasons, and a team like Essendon, 2 seasons in, so there's already these established clubs. So Sydney and Essendon, I'll go both of them. They've come into the system and actually being able to perform almost straight away. Second season in, they're making finals, so it sets them up for a great few years down the track. And as you said, their system is obviously working because they're getting the results.
Yeah, and that one's going to be a ripper as well. And like you said, like I said before, it'd be really good to see either of these teams win and then really take it up to whoever loses that qualifier in the semi next week. But it's going to be tough. I think there'll be a great crowd at the Cattery. I don't really know who I'm going to pick here, but I just think, there's something about those Bombers for me. I think, Bonnie Toogood's been absolutely incredible up forward for them. Just marks everything. Like, to average 6.5 marks a game, like, that's going pretty well when the majority of the league, averages 4 or less. and she kicks very straight in front of goal as well. So that's another person to watch, along with both the Press Parkises and someone else who is a beast who was on the women's footy show a few weeks ago, Georgia Nanscorn as well, who's a clearance machine. So players to watch everywhere in that one. It'll be another really close game. I'm backing these eliminators to be closer than the qualifiers.
I'll go one further. I'll go Essendon. I just had to see when they last played. So they played in round 6, and Essendon got the wood. They got the chocolates, got the wood over them by 10. So I reckon it will still be a close game, 29-19 in that game. I expect something similar, so I'm going to go Essendon.
And often in finals, and we see this again in most sports, they're much more defensive games. So I don't think you'll see too many sides blowing out anybody. So it will be, I reckon it will be a similar margin, potentially even closer, both teams maybe in the 20s, depending on weather as well. I think we're in for a pretty good weekend this week. So that'll be pretty cool as well. And then there's the big one, Melbourne, who I mentioned, dropped that top spot. So did miss out on that potential home grand final. But again, another team that's proven, going against North Melbourne, who I mentioned off the top of this segment, completely unproven against the top 4 or the other top 3 teams. But they're just one of those teams where they have everything. They have all the tools to be able to do it. They just haven't done it. But they've got players who just sit so far atop in terms of midfield duo. Jasmine Garner and Ash Riddle, they get so much of the football, it's not funny. They both average 30 and above. No one else in the league does that. So they've got both of those players, but at the same time, they haven't been able to take it up to those other teams who may not have ball gatherers like that, but they have more scoring power. And one thing that has hurt North Melbourne a little bit, particularly against those top 3 and really top 8 sides, is the ability to defend teams scoring really heavily. We saw it when they played the Crows. Again, like I said before, they just couldn't play the full game out, and the Crows ended up, stacking it on, and they couldn't really go with them. They've got scoring power. Their midfielders, hit the scoreboard. Like Jazz Garner, averages 30 and a goal. But like I said, sometimes numbers don't tell you the whole story, and they might be getting all this footy and hitting their opportunities in front of the sticks. But at the end of the day, you need to lead your teammates to do the same thing, and it's going to take a whole team effort for the Kangaroos, because I think if there's any game this week that ends in a bit of a blowout, I think it's going to be this one in Melbourne's favour.
Well, I can't disagree with you there. I think Adelaide, Brisbane and Melbourne are in the top rung of the teams. North Melbourne, I think, sit alone in that next rung below. But that's how far of a distance I can't actually say, but I think it is that much of a difference that what you say is this is going to be the blowout. I can't disagree with. I can't argue against it, because Melbourne is so far, like the 3 teams, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, and yes, Brisbane finished below North Melbourne, but Brisbane have that finals experience where North Melbourne, they might have it, but they don't have that premiership mentality. They haven't won a premiership.
And the thing is, like I mentioned numbers, and if you want to go further into numbers against North Melbourne, I mentioned that inability to really defend the top teams. Melbourne have Kate Hoare and Eden Zanker, who average 2 goals a game. And then they've got Taylor Harris up forward, who averages 4.5 marks and half a goal a game. So that's what they're going to contend with in their defence this week. And I think for sure, Garner and Riddle are going to get heaps of the footy. They're going to provide opportunities for their forwards, the likes of Talia Randall, people like that up forward. They're going to provide opportunities there. But at the same time, if it's a shootout, which it's likely going to be, I'm not sure they can go with them unless they see like a monumental game from their leaders, because that's the thing that has been talked about throughout this season is their leaders are outstanding. They get heaps of the footy. They always have amazing games and they pull them over the line against teams outside the 8. But against teams in the top 4, you need more than that. You can't just have your leaders going. You need to have that bottom 4, especially in finals. That's what wins you footy games in the finals, is your bottom 4 needs to step up to the plate. So, and it sounds like I'm being critical on North. I'm not. I'm just going off history, and the history is they're unproven. But I tell you what, going the other way, if they are to pull it off and defeat Melbourne this weekend, I think that will be, you can't speak how important that would be to them, and they would definitely be a genuine contender to win that home prelim. after doing that. But yeah, I'm definitely backing Melbourne in that one. But that one will be at Icon Park at 3:05 on Sunday afternoon to conclude the first weekend of finals. 4 massive games, and I think each one of them can go either way. But after a 10-game season, the 8th season of AFLW, it's in an amazing spot, and I can't wait for these next 4 weeks.
Okay, so you can't wait for the next 4 weeks. So I'm going to go through the teams. I want you to tell me who you think can and can't win the flag, and we're going to revisit this in 4 weeks' time, okay, Boxy? So first off, Adelaide.
Yeah. Yes,
Melbourne.
Yes.
North Melbourne.
No.
Brisbane.
Yes.
Gold Coast.
No.
Geelong.
Yes.
Essendon.
Yes.
Sydney.
No.
Well, we'll see in 4 weeks' time if you're right or wrong on that.
I think the only one that probably the one I'm least confident about there is Essendon. But like I said before, they must just have some sort of belief. They've come so far, and I think if they were to do it, I don't know, we've probably talked about this enough, but I'm just so excited. But if the Bombers were to do it, it'd probably be the best football story we've had in recent time. To go from absolute, near zero to absolute hero so quickly would be really cool. But talking about teams that went 0 to hero, an Australian, just remarkable Australian story. We were at absolute zero after getting absolutely belted by India and South Africa. But our Aussies in the Cricket World Cup over in India are officially into the semi-finals. We've won every game since, and we've done it in style. And we don't have our cricket guru Fish with us today, so we'll gloss over it pretty quickly, and we'll do a big semi-final preview next week, so look forward to that. But I don't think we can go anywhere or any further without mentioning one man, and he goes by the name The Big Show, and his name is Glenn Maxwell. And I think pretty much anybody that knows anything about cricket in the whole world will know the name Glenn Maxwell, and I'll be telling my kids about it. They'll be telling their kids. I'll be telling my grandkids, because he'll be in the history books forever from now on for what he's done. And unless you're with Optus, you probably would have seen it for yesterday. But it is absolutely remarkable. He fell off a golf cart, and then less than a week later, he has officially made just an innings that just, awe-inspiring to absolutely put the team on his back and carry us to the win against Afghanistan. The other night, we were in big trouble, and I have no words for it. It just seems that every time I don't watch Australia bat, Glenn Maxwell breaks records.
Well, keep not watching then. I think that's the answer. I mean, I was looking over the stats, and I actually had it written down, then you mentioned it pre-podcast about he scored over 1/3 of the team's score. And
68%.
Yeah, like how rare is that? And I just go into that, and we keep mentioning the what ifs and the wickets, the opportunities, and I was hearing 4 opportunities for him to have gone out before he made 40, let alone 100, 150 or 200. And it's just a reminder for me about cricket, where we were speaking a couple of weeks ago about when we faced India and we dropped Kohli, and like how he went on to dominate. And it's usually the case, if you drop a chance, it comes back to bite you. Once again, they missed out on a few opportunities, and Maxwell's just gone, okay, bang, bang, bang. And it's something about Maxwell as well. Like, the pressure's not really on him. He's gone out on a bit. I don't think teams rate him as highly as other batters nowadays. But I think it's coming back to, they have to, because he scores. And if you don't rate him, he punishes you.
Yeah, it's remarkable what he's done. And I remember we talked about him pre-tournament and how we sent Ashnagar home, and we weren't doubting Glenn Maxwell, but we were just doubting that decision because of the importance of spin. And I should reiterate, he did take a wicket in the game as well. So just in case he wasn't man of the match, in the first innings he took a wicket. And yeah, that's probably the biggest and best decision any of the coaching staff made all tournament, is backing him in as that second spinning, all-rounder. And in the end, he's taken a few wickets, but it's been his batting when, our two top three batters, I keep saying, Labuschagne and Smith, haven't really fired. It's been him at wherever he comes in. And I want to outline this innings because it's been renowned around the world, and for good reason, as the greatest one-day international innings in history. And that is a fair enough, although lofty, it's a fair enough summation of that, because we bowled first and we weren't really under the pump, but as usual, as we're seeing throughout this World Cup on similar pitches, runs came quite easily for Afghanistan, who in themselves have really gone from zero to hero, and they're a really good story as well. They're one win out of playing finals. If they win their last game against South Africa, they're in. They're playing in the semi-finals, which is quite remarkable for them. And they've got superstars themselves who are really experienced international cricketers. So they're not that, minnow, easy knockover sort of team anymore. So in saying that, Ibrahim Zadran made their first 100 at a World Cup, and it was an unbeaten one too. Batted the entirety of their innings, all 50 overs, for his 129 not out, which is pretty impressive. They posted 291, so almost 300 as well. And all of a sudden, we had a bit of a chase on our hands against a bowling attack that's quality as well. Majib, Rahman, and of course Rashid Khan in those conditions were going to be always really hard. And then we came in and we're in trouble. There's no doubt about that. We were in big trouble after Warner and Head have dominated the games they've played in this tournament together. 1 for 4, we lost Travis Head. 2 for 43, 3 for 49, 4 for 49, 8.2 overs. So 8.2 overs in, we're 4 for 49. Keep in mind we're chasing 290. Glenn Maxwell comes in at number 6. No one has ever made 200 outside of an opener. And keep that in mind because it might help you later. Maxwell's come in at number 6. He finished on one leg, full body cramps, on 201 not out of 128 bowls, striking at 157. But just to paint you a bit more of a picture of it as well, 4 for 49 he came in. He was batting with Marnus, top 10 batsman in the world in pretty much every format. Thinking that's pretty good. Maxi gets going, Marnus will stick around, all good. He goes 5 for 69. Marcus Stoinis comes in, he goes. Mitchell Stark comes in, he goes. Pat Cummins comes to the crease. We're 7 for 91. It's not even 20 overs in yet. So we've got our number 6 and number 8 at the crease, and we still need a further 200 runs. And I think as a bowler myself, it's nowhere near as good as, the weight and, just skill of Maxwell's innings. But Pat Cummins' innings, I saw a highlight of it because I think one of the other fast bowlers, I think Mitchy Marsh, the Bison, shared it and said, best innings I've ever seen. They put together the highest 8th wicket partnership in one-day international history, not just World Cup, one-day international history. 202 runs they put together. Pat Cummins scored 12 of those, and he would have just defended everything for the rest of the time.
It reminds me of the time of Ben Stokes.
I was going to say that. So England have got Leach and Stokes, and we've got Maxwell and Cummins.
But Cummins with the captain's performance, I think, is one of those things where you don't necessarily need to be performing with the bat with runs. It's actually keeping your wicket so that the other person who's on fire and knowing how to actually, we need to protect my wicket because if I go out, who's next in? If I go out, next person goes out. He can be not out, but he's not making runs. So I think Cummins there with an amazing performance. And that has to actually be stated as well as Maxwell.
100%, and that's the beauty of cricket. You can be as good as you want, but you can't do it without your partner. And Pat Cummins is definitely half the reason Glenn Maxwell's able to break all those records, and he'll forever be part of that record. at that eighth wicket partnership. And as I mentioned, 201 not out from 128 bowls, striking at 157. On the other hand, complete fire and ice opposite. Pat Cummins, 12 not out off 68 bowls, striking at just 17. So he kept his wicket against world-class spinners in Mujeeb and Rashid on a turning wicket and allowed his teammate to literally pull us over the line. And towards the end, like I mentioned, when he was on about 157, there's a video where he just collapses on the ground. He can't actually move.
He said after the game that he was getting cramps, he was having back spasms and all that. And like
trainer comes out, says to him...
You think he's going to be retired hurt? Almost.
Trainer
and then he
comes out, Maxie says, I'm going in. I can't. I'm going in. I'm in too much pain. Trainer says, mate, to be honest, if you went in, you'd be in more pain right now. So I watched Maxie's interview after it, and he said, well, to be honest, it actually made it easier because I knew I wasn't going to move. If I saw a ball, I was just bloody hitting it. And he hit him. Like, he was hitting shots where he did not move his feet, and this is Glenn Maxwell for you. If you're watching for technique, him and Steve, you don't watch those guys because there is none. He's just standing there, and his hand-eye coordination is probably the best.
Oh, the wrist movement, you just go bang, and you're like, this looks easy. We did net session last week. I'm there going, watching something like that. I'm like, okay, they make it look so easy that I'm there going, in the nets, almost the same amount of foot movement, none.
Yeah.
And
he relies on hand-eye, but because his hand-eye is so good, he just times shots. And some of the shots he was hitting, like, please go and watch it. We might even link it on our socials. But just go and watch even just the highlights of his innings because some of the balls, like really full, great ball on middle stump, and he's standing there not moving his feet, just watching it and whipping it over mid-wicket for 6, but not just 6, like 10 rows deep into the stands when he's absolutely knackered and full body cramping. And yeah, I don't think I can give any better of an outline about it. It's just remarkable. Team on the back, and it'll go into cricket folklore forever. And that's the reason we won. And the weight of the win wasn't just, you get out of jail and you beat them. Locking in a semi-final. So no worries about the last game now. We're playing a semi-final against South Africa. So quite remarkable, but he's not the first to do it. And this is going to be the catalyst for this week's quiz, Woodsy.
I'm not going to be able to answer it if it's anything to do with who are the previous 200 scorers. I saw a graphic on this. I can't recall any, so I'm just going to forfeit right now. But let's leave it for...
Well, you've got to have a crack. So
let's leave this for Fish next week.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the year.
You got to give me year and country, and I
can give you year and country. So there's been 10. I've got the 10 highest scores in World Cups. So
World Cups, only World Cups. Okay.
So I'll also make it even easier for you, and I'll go the latest one. So the oldest one is in 1987, and the earliest ones are obviously this year. There's 3 scores, 200 plus. The rest are between 170 and 200. There's 10 of them.
Okay.
So obviously Maxwell's one of them. So he's number 3 with his 201 for Australia at 2023. Can you name the top 2? They were both in 2015.
I think I can. I'm only going to have a guess here because I can try to figure out who I got. I want to say one's a Kiwi.
One is a Kiwi.
Is it Guptill?
Martin Guptill. Can you name the score?
No, I can't. It just I remember the graphic. I'm like, I know it was a Kiwi in 2015. Oh,
it was. So Martin Guptill at the probably not the biggest ground in the world, you could definitely say. I'm pretty sure it was at Eden Park. 237. That's number 1. Holds the record to this day.
So you can see there's nothing, no cheating here.
The second one also in 2015. Another non-Australian. This one was in Australia.
What country?
West Indies.
The only who was he playing back then? I want to say Gale.
Chris Gale. Can you name the score?
Once again, no.
215 against Zimbabwe. I believe that was at the SCG.
Okay.
Then we've got Glenn Maxwell. So they're the 3 over 200. So it's interesting. And like I said before, the only non-opener to do it, 200 plus, which obviously for those that don't really understand cricket, the openers will face a lot more of the ball than a number 6 does. But didn't worry Glenn.
Well, they will usually face
Usually.
they go
They've
out.
got more chance,
Yeah.
you could say, yeah. So Glenn came in, he was basically at 18.5 over handicap, and he still reached the 200 mark. The next one, number 4, a South African in 1996. This is probably the hardest on the list.
I don't know who was playing in 96. I know Rhodes Callis might have been. I don't think...
We can go to the next one in 1999.
What were the initials for that one?
For the South African?
Yeah.
GK.
Jacques Callis.
Gary Kirsten, 188.
JK.
GK, yeah.
Yeah.
I might give you... There's another Australian on the list.
No, go to the next one. Let's see. What country?
I think he's Indian in 1999.
No, I won't.
Sourav Ganguly, 183.
Yep.
The next one is a very, very well-known West Indian, one of their most famous players in 1987.
Was Lara?
Close. He was very classy batsman.
No, Lara wouldn't have been playing in 87.
Very, very classy batsman, quite a tall man. And this is, I think, one of the...
Big Viv?
Big Sir Vivian Richards with 181.
Yep.
The next one, just 3 runs behind, an Australian in 2015. Also against Afghanistan.
Oh.
Keep in mind, all openers, I think. Well, this one's definitely an opener.
Warner?
David Warner, 178 against Afghanistan in 2015. So interesting that our 2 highest one-day World Cup scores have come against the same team. So I'm sure they've got a lot of mental demons and nightmares going on when they play a team in green and gold. The next 2, a couple of Indian legends in 2011 in their winning campaign.
I'll go Tendulkar.
No.
No. Oh. Kohli was in 2011?
Not quite.
No.
A bit older.
I'm trying to think of who there was. I'm thinking VVS, but not.
There's a V in one of them. We've got Kapil Dev, 175, and Virender Sehwag, also with 175. So they're tied at 9. And the last one was earlier this tournament.
What country?
South Africa.
Nah.
Quinton de Kock, someone that
would not have been able to get that.
I'm pretty sure that was in the first or second game because Quinton made back-to-back hundreds and he's really come back to form. So in the semi-final, and again, we won't go into it too much because of the preview coming next week, but I just cannot wait to watch both opening pairs go at it because you've got left-hand galore. You've got Quinton de Kock, who just like David Warner has returned to his best form this World Cup. He tore us apart the first time. And then obviously you've got Warner and Travis Head as well on our side. But as a bonus question, there's one more Australian on this list. And this is a 200-plus score. A women's cricketer held the record for 26 years. She was alone in the 200 club at a World Cup.
I can picture her. I can actually picture Clark.
Belinda Clark. So
yes,
for 26 years she was alone there with the record for the only Australian in the 200s at a World Cup, and now Maxie joins her. And pretty cool, that 26-year mark. I myself broke a 26-year record back in high school, a high jump record. So legends.
Does it still stand?
Pretty sure it does, yeah. Legends everywhere on this podcast today.
Talking about the semi, though, against South Africa, this will be the 3rd time we actually play South Africa in a semi. We'll detail it more next week, but looking back at it, 2007 was the last one, but I think the most famous of them all, and I think it'll be previewed quite a bit. You might see highlights of it pop up on socials, is 1999, the tied match where Australia progressed. But I think that's just one of the things to look forward to in the next week.
Yeah, massive, massive game. Winner, well, for mine, almost certainly to play India unless they are upset. But yeah, basically, for us, everything is set. We've got South Africa either next Wednesday or next Thursday. You'll find that out on Tuesday next week when we are going to go through it. But to get from where we were to where we are now, it's just remarkable, and very likely that to win the tournament, we're going to have to beat the only two teams that defeated us in this tournament. So it's crazy how things add up. But the things that aren't quite decided yet is that we've got a couple more games. Australia's got the last game against Bangladesh, but what remains to be seen is who is going to play the hosts in that other semi-final. New Zealand at the moment are fourth. It'd be pretty crazy if they are to drop out considering the tournament that they had and the fast start that they had. But they're in fourth at the moment, but on the same amount of wins and same amount of points, Afghanistan and Pakistan. So I'm not sure who New Zealand play.
Afghanistan play South Africa, don't they?
Afghanistan do play South Africa. Pretty sure Pakistan play England, and I'm not really sure. I have to look up who New Zealand play, but they'll all be gunning for that fourth spot. But it's a pretty tough one in the end. It's pretty much like you get into the finals, but you're as up against it as you can be, which is why Maxwell's ending is so important to us, because we don't have to play India on their conditions in a tournament in which they have not been defeated. So pretty big for those three teams. Our last one, like I mentioned, is against Bangladesh, who I think have the one win. They're down towards the bottom of the table, and that's a complete dead rubber for us. But it does beg the question, do we play a few of the guys at the end of the squad who may not have played to give the older guys like Maxwell a go, or do we keep the same 11 in and keep our form?
I think we were discussing this earlier, where it is a chance to rest. It's like that bye week or the round 24 game where you've already won it. You're already held in the finals. You can rest your players and make them right for the finals. I think this is a chance where we can rest Maxwell. I mean, you give him a chance, get a few of the other people that need a rest, play the youngsters in a game, and then, full squad against South Africa. But
yeah, and it's interesting as well because South Africa don't have to win theirs either, and there's no home ground sort of thing going on here because we're in India. So it doesn't matter who finishes second and who finishes third. But there's a lot more intrigue into their game because, as you mentioned, they play Afghanistan, who's going to be going all guns blazing to try and win that match and make finals. So that's a very interesting one for us. Yeah, it remains to be seen what we do. I don't think you'll see Maxwell just because the guy was absolutely knackered. I mean, he carried us over that line. He was on one leg, and if there's anyone where you want fit, it's going to be him. It's going to be Warner. So might be a different 11. We'll wait and see. That one, I think, is on Sunday. So, again, we don't really need to win that one. Bangladesh haven't been in great form either, so might not be the best of showings. But something we have to mention before we jump off the cricketing segment is an absolute legend who will always be in and around Australian cricket when it's brought up, when it's talked about, when you read books, when you look at all the records. One of our greatest female cricketers ever, Meg Lanning, has retired from international cricket, and just like Erin Phillips before, done so much for our country, for the sport, and she's been so successful. Again, you could talk about for hours, both for her state team, for her domestic teams, but then internationally, where she's saying goodbye. Just one of our best ever, and we wish all the best to her. Thank her for her service, and yeah, one of the most successful people ever, and an amazing person as well. So we're going to miss Meg, but yeah, farewell.
That's good. Now, talking about cricket, before we move on to the cricket, we've got to look at the other side of the table, I think. The intrigue of that with England. Now, obviously, they're the reigning champs. They won't be the champs, obviously, after the final. But when was the last time the reigning champs failed to make the semis?
Wow. That's really testing my knowledge. Okay. It's not last time. It's not the time before. It's 2011.
Correct.
Australia?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's embarrassing. That one was in India and Sri Lanka, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So that's another positive. So we've made the finals in India. So we've written that wrong.
It's just to show, like, yeah, okay, we're not the last team to do it now. It's like when Collingwood.
Now it's England, and there's nothing better than that.
Collingwood won the premiership. The last premiership's now not against St Kilda. It's great.
Yeah. So no, that's a really interesting stat. There's big problems going on in England, and they may have won convincingly.
The moral victories.
Yeah, they convincingly beat my Dutchman last night. But I mean, there's still things, and you watch them and you go, like, what are you doing? Like Joe Root, one of their best batters of this modern era, his wicket last night. Please go and watch it if you're an Aussie who hates the Poms like I do, because it was hilarious. Got himself into a Glenn Maxwell-like position, but his timing wasn't quite there. Got bowled middle stump through his legs trying to play a bit of French cricket. So that was quite funny. It's good to see them at the bottom of the table, and they're not going to worry us in the finals. They'll be off home into the cold wind down in England. So off you go, Poms. Hopefully you're watching us on the TV. But something I've been watching on the TV is the NBL, and it's absolutely roaring. And so is my Melbourne United. Woodsy, they're still on top, 8-2 at the moment. They're just having one of those seasons where I know it's only early, but I think we're back, and I think we're definitely going to contend this year. I just think the roster's built up really well. Both sides of the ball, they just play a really good brand of basketball. They're well coached. But another team that you can never put out of it is the team just below them, and the Sydney Kings, who are at the moment in that second spot, that other spot that's you're locked into finals in. And again, probably has proven a team as you can get in the Sydney Kings. They're basically, a lot of their history is winning, especially recently. And then there's your South Melbourne Phoenix and the Jack Jumpers, who are neck and neck as well, 6-4 and 5-4. Obviously, the games played is, like usual, a bit up and down here with teams in and out and teams not playing as many games on a weekend as the others. But yeah, Southeast Melbourne are third at the moment. Well, they've played one extra game, but yeah, Sydney 6-3, Southeast Melbourne 6-4. Big game on Sunday, Woodsy, the Melbourne throwdown between Melbourne and Southeast Melbourne. Going to be a massive one there, but the Phoenix are looking all right. I think they're playing some pretty good basketball. I mean, you always try and say that, I should support them instead. And
I try and convince you and Fisher to support them. I mean, Fisher lives in the southeast of Melbourne, and he goes, oh, when are they going to be playing games there? And it's like, well, once the redevelopment of the state basketball...
Build it and they will come, Woodsy.
Once the redevelopment, I think there'll be a few games there. But as I said, the invitation's there. I mean, they do play games in Gippsland.
They do.
It might be the Traralgon way, but they still play games down your area. So,
beautiful
once again,
country.
support the teams that support your area.
Yeah. Well, as I said off air before the show, if they win a championship before Melbourne United, then I'll be right on board, mate. I'll have the green on. Don't worry about that. But another team in green doing quite well as usual. They've performed so well since they were added to the competition. Tassie, they've got that Tassie sort of fight.
They're frustratingly good.
They've got that Tassie fight about them, which is relatively new to, I guess, international or national competition in Australia. It's just, I guess, their second or third team in national competitions. But yeah, that Tassie fight just irritates you, and they always steal wins against good sides. That's just the way they play. And another team that has really got back on track, they had a few games where they took losses and they just didn't really play very well, and that's Brisbane. And that's been led by their superstar Nathan Sobey, who I didn't really like back in the day because, he'd give my United, buckets, but he's averaging over 20 points a game this season, leading the league and leading the Bullets back into contention. So a lot to play out there. And then just below them inside the play-in is Perth, who obviously everyone knows, who knows the NBL, can't discount the Wildcats. Got one of the best players the league's ever seen in Brycey Cotton. So it's all happening in the NBL. Like I mentioned, Woodsy, Melbourne versus South Melbourne this weekend. Going to be massive, and a lot of NBL still to play out this season. But my United look good, and your Phoenix are chasing them down. Another BL that's happening quite shortly too. You're going out tomorrow to one of the practice games. The ABL is starting this week.
Yeah, so the Australian baseball, I was about to say basketball, the Australian Baseball League, the mighty Melbourne Aces are in it, and it's back to a 6-team competition. So Geelong, Korea, and Auckland have withdrawn financial issues and whatnot. So it's back to the 6-team competition. Adelaide, they're looking strong to go back-to-back. I know Melbourne Aces were trying to get it back, and I think the internationals are going to be playing a big part this season. Next week, obviously, it's the first round, so Melbourne will be playing host to Perth. Adelaide will be playing host to Brisbane, and Sydney play host to Canberra, and I think it's the highway game or series that they call it. But yeah, so I just had to have a look at the stats, and ABL put this out. So 6 players with MLB experience, not NBL. MLB experience. There's 101 players with minor league time, 11 players in the Korean top league. There's 14 players in the Japan top league. So there's 15 Japanese players, 11 Korean players, and 66 players with current affiliated contracts with MLB Korean top league or Japanese top league. So it's an amazing league in our backyard. I mean, you've got somebody who's a home running, I think it was Reed, coming in to play with the Melbourne Aces. So that's good. I'm trying to figure out his name as New York Yankees, I think he played for. Could be wrong. I'll get corrected, no doubt. But it's going to be an exciting series. Obviously, it's always too early to predict who's going to do well, who's going to do poorly. But I'm hoping that the Melbourne Aces can get back into Claxton Shield contention after getting back-to-back in the COVID years.
Certainly really exciting, and it's one of those leagues that should not be discounted at all because it is absolute quality. It's really exciting, but because of the popularity of baseball, the sport itself, not being a massive Australian sport, it's swept under the rug a little bit, but it certainly shouldn't be. Woodsy is going to be around it, around the Aces this season, who are a great club, very proud club, and yeah, if you're around Melbourne, get around them, get around the competition because it's an absolute ripper. One of the obviously best in the world in terms of the talent that come over, and again, going to be really good season there.
Greg Bird has joined the Aces,
and a massive season to come for the Aces. And in saying that, talking imports and people travelling around the world, we've got Aussies Around the Grounds this week, and the weekly wonder that caught my eye this week, I'm changing codes. I'm usually in the American football world when I do these, but this week I've got our man Ange Postecoglou, and unlike we usually do, it's nothing to do with how well the Spurs were going, how good the win was, or how
you can't even do that because they lost.
Exactly, because they lost, and I'm still highlighting in because, well, you can't beat around the bush. One of the big reasons they did lose is they had 2 red cards, so they were playing with 9 men. They got defeated by Chelsea, which is, I think, the first or second time they've lost this year. They haven't had many of them. They were on top of the table. But after the match, when most managers, or nearly all managers, when posed the question about the officiating, about the VAR, the whole setup, when most managers would be pretty emotional, would probably attack the system, whinge, not our man. He was completely composed, and he actually just said the opposite. He took full responsibility, even though those decisions were nothing to do with him. He said, I've talked to the players, sometimes that happens. That's sport, and you got to take it on the chin. I've had good decisions and bad decisions in my time. He didn't whine, he didn't complain. He just took it on his chin like a real manager, and I think, Woodsy, that's the sort of manager you want to play for, because usually when managers come out and say those sort of things, it's just because they don't want to get fined, or they're just saying it because their PR manager says you to. But you could tell with Ange when he gave that talk, if you haven't seen it, he was completely authentic. It's everything he wanted to say. You could tell he hadn't spoken to anyone before that. He just said, sometimes you lose in sport, sometimes you get bad decisions. I'm not at all mad at the referees. They're doing their job. And as a player, I think to have that support, and obviously behind closed doors, when he gave his post-game talk to his players, he would have sympathised with them. He would have been annoyed. He may have even said, why did you make that decision? He may have said, it was a bad decision. But when asked the question to the press, He had full support for them, which, you'd love to play for a person like that because it shows he's naturally an authentic and a really nice and supportive person. And for me, that's the reason they're atop of in the top 3 in the Premier League this season in his first year. And that's why he gets so much buy-in from his players. So that's something that, again, not really sport, not really a play or anything per se, but just Ange being an absolute legend as usual. So hopefully he can resurrect that loss and get a few more wins for Tottenham this season. But we'll go over to the NBA now, they're in the middle of a mid-season tournament. I won't really go into that because there's a lot to explain and it'll probably confuse you. But it's included in the 82 games. So they've got a lot of Aussies, like we talked about last week, getting it done. And we've got Dyson Daniels and the New Orleans Pelicans. And Dyson's averaging about 7 points a game and 4 rebounds and 2 assists. Doing it pretty well there, playing 22 minutes as well, which is quite good for Dyson. He's still a bit of a young'un in the league over there. Josh Giddey, though, 28 minutes a game. And, he's usually on triple-double watch. He's averaging 12, 6, and 4. But he's such a key cog to that Oklahoma City Thunder team, who I really have as a smoky this season. Josh Green's getting good minutes for the Dallas Mavericks as well, 26 a game. And he's putting up 8 points, 2 and 1. And the Mavericks have started absolutely brilliantly behind their megastar, Luka Doncic, making a few moves as well. Grant Williams came over from the Celtics. He's playing well as well. It's great to see Josh get that contract and really start playing with confidence there. And he's really blossoming into a great player on both ends. He uses his size. He's great size of a footy player, really, Joshy Green. So great to see him doing well there. And Joey Ingles, he's not really stuffing the stat sheet, but he's playing 18 minutes a game for his 2 points, 2 rebounds, and playing a bit like an old head these days, a bit like our man Extra Time Zone, Slow-Mo Scargetta, but he's getting it done there. Jock Landale in Houston, he's doing all right as well, 13 minutes a game. Duop Reith and Paddy Mills, yet to see the floor this season, according to what I've got here, but the big news for me and the big news for Australian basketball is Ben Simmons, 31 minutes a game for the Brooklyn Nets. So that's saying that he's back, he's happy, and he's healthy. And I'm not really fussed by the numbers he puts up, but 6.5 and 10 rebounds and 6 assists a game. So again, he might not be blowing up the points part of the stat sheet, but he does everything else for you. And he's a bit like a traditional big man, but he can run the point as well and be a traditional point guard. So really valuable for the Nets, and I think he'll be really valuable for us in the upcoming Olympics and national competitions. And then we've got Matisse Thybulle in Portland, who been struggling a little bit. They lost one of their best ever guards in Damian Lillard in the off-season, late in the off-season / pre-season. So struggling a little without him. But Matisse is doing all right, 4 points, 1 rebound a game. And Dante Exum, who I didn't mention before, also on the Mavs with Joshy Green. And he's just averaging the 2 points a game so far, but they're successful as well. So, again, Kyrie Irving, he's included in all of these, but if you don't know the story, he was born in Australia, but he doesn't really claim to be Australian. Sometimes he says he'd like to play, he would have liked to have played for the Boomers, but, everything you hear from Kyrie, you got to, take with a bit of a grain of salt, because that man is a little bit different than the average Joe, but averaging the most points out of any of the Aussies, you could say, 20 points a game. Also on the Mavs, so bit of a dark horse this season, the Mavs. They were pretty annoyed, I reckon, last season not making the playoffs. They've definitely got the players to do so. So that's all for the Aussies over there, but again, only a couple of weeks into the NBA season. It will run to June next year, so a lot to play out there. I want to go over to the world of motorsport now and F1, but I'm not really too happy to give you the report this week because it's not a good one. After our 2 boys were doing so well, they didn't quite get it going in Interlagos in Brazil. Unfortunately, neither of them really ever had pace, and Danny Ricciardo copped a bit of damage early in the race. So they both finished well outside the top 10. I think they were around the 16th and 17th mark, maybe 14th and 15th. There was a few DNFs, so no points for them in Brazil. They'll look forward to the first ever Las Vegas Grand Prix, which will be not this weekend but the one after. And I know the sort of character Danny Rick is, he'll be very excited for that one. The track looks really fast as well off the design, so hopefully that'll treat him really well, and Oscar and the McLaren team can get a few more points. Oscar in his rookie season still sitting in 9th in the Drivers' Championship was pretty good effort as well. So 2 races to go, obviously Vegas and Abu Dhabi, some pretty cool places to drive a race car around. So hopefully our boys can get a few points in both of those. We've also got Jackie Doohan, who I mentioned a few episodes ago, is fighting for that top 4 spot in the F2 Championship as well, and he got to test out one of the F1 cars a couple of weeks ago, so he's another talent for us. But I always try and whack him in, and my man Max Verstappen, the Dutchman, he just leads the sport these days, and you can't discuss Formula 1 without discussing Max. To sum him up in 2023, this is of this week as well, so prior to Vegas and Abu Dhabi, the last 2 races. He's won the World Drivers' Championship for the 3rd time. His championship points are enough to win the World Constructors' Championship on his own, so if you don't follow that, the World Constructors' Championship, there's 10 teams in F1, there's 20 drivers, so each team has 2 drivers. Red Bull, who Max Verstappen drives for, is him and Sergio Perez, the Mexican. So they've won the Constructors' Championship because the Constructors' Championship is based off both drivers' combined points. Max Verstappen has enough points on his own to have won it on his own. So that's beating all 18 other drivers and Perez on his own, which is remarkable. 10 race wins in a row this season. That was earlier in the year. That's a record. 17 race wins in total. That's a record. All-time win percentage record is 17 out of 20, which he has already. 11 poles, 520 points, record. 922 laps led, record. 19 podiums, record. His career now, he has 52 race wins, which I'm pretty sure is 1 win off Sebastian Vettel in 3rd, 2 wins off 3rd all time. He's 26 years old. So a lot of people say, and it's always going to be the argument in Formula 1, it's the car, he's got the best car, any driver in that car would do it. He hasn't had good teammates to contest him.
Would anybody in the car actually do it, though? Because I don't know F1, and I'm there.
Well, Sergio Perez is in the same car, and he's not doing it.
It would be a mixture, wouldn't it? The talent and...
100%.
You talk about Maxwell and his hand-eye coordination. I mean, to be doing F1, you need that hand-eye coordination. You need to be that awareness on that. I'm like, Verstappen's obviously got it.
You need to have some big, you need to have a bit of about you as well. You cannot be scared, and that is something this guy is not. He is not scared. In the start of his career, he was so not scared that he got into a lot of crashes and he pissed a lot of people off. I'm not gonna, I can't put that one lightly because he was so reckless. But now with the heights he has reached, the talent he drives with, the confidence, and you've got to have a little bit of a dog about you. You've got to be a little bit of an annoying person on the racetrack to be able to achieve this. And off the racetrack, he's not that at all. But on the racetrack, a lot of people don't like him, particularly fans of other drivers and other teams, particularly Lewis Hamilton fans, because of what happened a few years ago, as they continually bring up. But yeah, I think a lot of it is the car. I mean, Adrian Newey, probably one of the best there is at, designing this, what is literally a rocket ship. And, everyone calls it that, and it's a bit cliche, but the thing is fast everywhere, and it has not broken down, touch wood. But to design something like that after already designing 2 cars that have been at the front of the pack, remarkable. His engineers are remarkable as well. GP, Christian Horner's great principal. So it is a team sport, but only one man can drive the thing. And to see his teammate, who has won a couple of races, but there's only been 3 races that haven't been won by Max. 2 of them Perez, one of them Carlos Sainz from Ferrari. So I guess maybe Perez's car isn't as fast, but I really don't think it is. I just think Max is genuinely better. He's genuinely the best driver on the grid at the moment. Deserves everything he gets. I might be biased, but there's 2 races to go, and if he wins both, 3rd all time in race wins. He's still 50 behind Lewis Hamilton. So, for years people had to put up with him being great, and Hamilton fans are still pissed off that someone else is good. Sometimes I think it's satisfying for me, but yeah, you can't really put many words into how dominant and how remarkable he's been this season. I just tried to do it with the stats, but yeah, 2 races to go. So he's already got 17 this season, which is a record. So let's see how many more records he can break. The next one, like I said, Las Vegas in a couple weeks. But just a remarkable season. And yeah, one for the record books again. We've been talking a lot of records on this podcast, and there's some more for you. And that is about all we have time for in Aussies Around the Grounds. Australia, like I mentioned a few episodes ago, played quite well in the Oceania Flag Football Championships, as we just sort of get used to the sport before we have to play it in the Olympics in 2028 against the nation that created the sport. So that's pretty cool there. And obviously the Matildas won all 3 of the qualifiers that were in front of them over in the West for the Olympics. Did it quite convincingly with some massive wins in a few of them as well. They're just in some sort of form. Maybe the teams weren't quite up to our standard, but that was really cool to see them reach that next stage of Olympic qualification. They're obviously all back now with their international clubs, so really good to see as well. And I'm sure I'll have a bit more for you next week. Obviously, we've got plenty of guys in the NFL doing it brilliantly. I do want to mention, I do usually read out the stats, but at this stage, I think you know them. I heard you saying you were off air, you were watching Cam Johnston's massive punt. Obviously, Michael Dixon doing it brilliantly. The Hawks couldn't quite get it done. We got convincingly beaten. So Dicko was out there a fair bit on the weekend against Baltimore, Falale and the Ravens. Just wasn't the Hawks' day. And our other punter, Mitch Wishnowski, he had the bye. The Niners, I don't think, played on the weekend. And that man, Cam Johnston, wasn't really required too much because the rookie quarterback for the Texans, CJ Stroud, the number 2 pick, broke the NFL record for a rookie in terms of yards in a game, over 400. And with 45 seconds left, he marched down from one side of the field to the other, threw a touchdown, and won the game with basically no time on the clock. It's his first season, and he's just outside the MVP talk, which is quite remarkable. So the Texans got another win there. So pretty good to see Jono breaking records, his quarterback breaking records, all is in harmony there. And then there's our man, the big O-lineman, Jordan Mailata, who isn't just the highest rated offensive tackle, he's the highest rated offensive lineman in football per a stat I saw on Facebook. Not sure how accurate that is. It was on a Philadelphia fan page, but he's just remarkable in what is definitely the best offensive line in football. Mailata alongside Jason Kelsey, who was actually voted as a finalist for Sexiest Man Alive during the week, the big Jason Kelsey. Mailata, who has many talents, was seen singing during the week with Kelsey, but he's the best at his position in the competition at the moment. So pretty cool for the Samoan/Australian there. And that's all we have time for Aussies Around the Grounds this week. Join us next week. I'm sure there'll be a lot more NFL, NBA to play out. And we'll preview, obviously, the huge semi-final against South Africa. And we'll look back at this week's AFLW finals and look forward to a massive round of semi-finals. We're not sure who's going to be playing in them, but I think it can be pretty much anyone. A lot of sport to stick around for. Make sure you're up to date with your extra time viewing as well. You won't miss any of it. Stay with us, and we'll see you next week.